Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight we're headed somewhere quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind of silence that follows an explosion the government swears didn't happen. You're not a nuclear physicist, you're not a firefighter or an engineer. You're just available. And in the Soviet Union of 1986, available is all it takes. A clipboard said you were fit to serve, and now here you are, standing a few kilometers from a shattered reactor, wearing a canvas uniform and a badge that'll lie to you about how close you are to dying. The air tastes wrong. The trees are shedding leaves in June. And the men next to you, the ones who know too much, won't stop vomiting. So before your boots start melting and your fingernails quietly detach, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what unspeakable hour this video found you. I always like to know who else is still awake while we tiptoe through these grim parts of history. And if you'd like early access to more softly spoken existential crises, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Now lie back, breathe evenly, and ignore that faint ringing in your ears. It's probably not neurological damage. Let's begin. You arrive by train, though no one tells you why you're going or where exactly you're stopping. The schedule is blank. The windows are fogged with ash and sweat. Someone in your unit says you're near Pripyat, but the name is whispered like a curse. You step off onto cracked concrete, under a white sky that seems bleached rather than overcast. There's no welcoming party, no briefing, just an officer with a clipboard and a cigarette burned down to the filter, waving you forward like baggage on a conveyor belt. No one's wearing insignia. No one's smiling. You're told to stand in a line and wait, which, if nothing else, is familiar. You stand there long enough to realize something is deeply wrong. The air feels heavy, not like humidity, but like you're breathing through gauze. It smells faintly of ozone and wet metal, like someone left the lights on in a swimming pool full of car batteries. Around you, soldiers cough into their sleeves and try not to meet your eyes. No one talks. Even the birds are absent. It's not just quiet here. It's sterile, sanitized, a place where sound used to be, but has since been scrubbed away. You've never heard silence like this. It makes your bones feel hollow. Someone eventually hands you a form. It says something about temporary reassignment and vital infrastructure restoration. There's a stamp, some Cyrillic, and a signature that looks suspiciously like it was rubber stamped while the signer was blackout drunk. There's no mention of radiation, no mention of reactors, just local containment operations and a recommendation to avoid unnecessary contact with wild animals, standing water, and Western news broadcasts. You're given a canvas uniform, 2 sizes too large, and a pair of rubber boots that squelch when you walk. One man asks what exactly you're cleaning up. The officer says, "Nothing to be concerned about," and that's the end of the discussion. The trucks come before the questions can. You're loaded in the back with a dozen others, mostly young, mostly silent. A few older men have the look of factory veterans or ex-soldiers who've seen things they'll never admit to. One of them mutters something about graphite. Another slaps his arm and says, "It's just bugs." There are no bugs. The truck engine is loud, but not loud enough to cover the dread. You pass fields where the wheat has turned grey, trees that seem to droop in odd directions, like they're melting or mourning. A dog stands in the road and doesn't move as the truck barrels toward it. You close your eyes before the impact. You never hear it. At the sight, your first impression is confusion. There's too much military for a power plant, and not enough order for a military base. Tents have sprung up like fungal growths across the dirt. Geiger counters click in the hands of people who refuse to explain what they're measuring. There's a constant haze in the air. Not smoke, not fog, just a fine shimmer, like heat waves rising from pavement that's never cooled. Every surface is coated in a thin film of dust that you're told not to touch. You weren't planning to. You ask someone in a medic's vest what happened. He shrugs, wipes his face with a cloth and says, "It was a fire." That's all, a fire. But you've seen fires. Fires don't leave birds dead in the trees or paint burn marks onto the sky. Fires don't make your skin itch through your shirt. Someone else says it was a test that went wrong. Another says a turbine exploded. One man insists there was no explosion at all, just a leak. But none of them will look at the wreckage. No one even points in its direction. It's like there's a blind spot baked into everyone's vision. An unspoken agreement not to acknowledge the smouldering ruin in the middle of the compound. Eventually, you're given your orders. They're printed on thin paper that's already curling at the edges, as though the ink can't stand to be here either. You're assigned to Zone 3, Perimeter Debris Operations. You ask what that means. The officer grunts and says, "You'll find out." You're handed a shovel. It's not new. The handle is worn smooth, the metal chipped and darkened. You wonder how many people have used this before you, and whether any of them are still using shovels at all. No one offers a map. No one explains the boundaries. There's a vague gesture in the direction of the sarcophagus and the instruction to follow the markers. You ask what the markers look like. The officer doesn't answer. Behind you, a group of men in full protective gear walk past carrying a hose. Their boots leave dark prints in the dust, like footprints on the moon. You wonder what it means that they're wearing gas masks and you're not. By the end of your first hour, you've stopped asking questions. Not because you're satisfied, but because no one is listening. The place feels like a dream built out of warnings and lies. You try to hold on to the facts you arrived with. Your name, your age, the town you left behind. But already they feel distant. Like details from a movie you half watched in another life. What matters now is simple. You're here, you're assigned, and you're not allowed to leave. The only truth anyone seems willing to offer is this: don't touch anything you can't afford to bury. The thing about radiation is that you can't see it, smell it, or touch it, at least not in a way you'll recognise until it's far too late. That's what makes it such a charming companion out here. Unlike fire, it doesn't crackle. Unlike bullets, it doesn't whine past your ear. Radiation is polite in a way. It doesn't make a fuss. It simply arrives, sits down inside your body, and begins to rearrange you. Quietly, systematically, with the calm precision of someone who has all the time in the world. You're told very little about it, of course. They hand you a dosimeter, a chunky little badge that clicks occasionally and flashes numbers you've never been trained to interpret. You're told to keep it on you at all times like it's a lucky charm or a passport to safety. What they don't mention is that many of the dosimeters don't work properly, and even the ones that do have a habit of maxing out without warning. When that happens, the reading just stops, flatlines. You might think that means the danger has passed. It hasn't. It means the danger has graduated beyond the device's ability to care. For reference, the average person picks up about 0.1 microsieverts of radiation from eating a banana. That's not a joke. Bananas contain naturally occurring potassium-40, and someone somewhere decided that was a good baseline for comfort. A chest X-ray? About 100 bananas? A whole body CT scan? 10,000? The rooftop you're heading toward? Let's just say it's less. A few bunches of bananas and more. Congratulations, you're now the banana. The core itself emitted doses high enough to kill in under a minute. That's not speculation, that's geometry. But you're not standing on the core, thankfully. You're working around it, near it, next to it. That distinction is supposed to make you feel better. It doesn't. Even at the distances you're allowed to be, some surfaces are so radioactive that you'd absorb a year's worth of background radiation just by sitting on them for a lunch break. Not that you'll get one. Radiation doesn't respect your schedule. It doesn't care if it's break time. It doesn't care that you're 23, relatively healthy, and had plans to visit your cousin in Minsk next month. It just keeps leaking through walls, through clothing, through you. What radiation does inside the body depends on a few factors, none of which you control. There's the type of radiation, alpha, beta, gamma, neutron. There's the dose, How much? How fast? And then there's your body itself. Your genes, your age, your bad luck. Once inside, it begins damaging cells like a drunk carpenter swinging a sledgehammer through drywall. It rips through DNA, tears apart cellular instructions, breaks the machinery that tells your body when to grow, when to stop, when to die. Sometimes your cells panic and shut down. Sometimes they mutate. Sometimes they just forget what they were supposed to do and start multiplying with all the grace of a spreadsheet on fire. Radiation doesn't kill you directly. Not usually. It sets off a chain reaction. It frays your immune system. It scars your lungs. It turns your gastrointestinal tract into a battlefield. Your body begins failing at all the little things you didn't know it was constantly doing right. You bruise easier. You can't heal from cuts. Your gums swell. Your bones ache. Your stomach knots and stays that way. It's not dramatic like the movies, it's just relentless. And worse, it's internal. You can't run from it because it's already behind your ribs, ticking. You might assume someone would tell you how to protect yourself, but most of the men around you are just as in the dark. Some were given short pamphlets, printed in bulk, describing vague hygiene protocols and food safety tips. Don't touch exposed metal. Don't drink from open sources. Wear gloves, even if they're too big. Others received nothing at all. You hear rumours that the officers got better gear, more detailed briefings, higher quality dosimeters. But that's not your rank. And anyway, envy is a waste of energy when your white blood cell count is already doing its best impression of a sinking ship. There's something uniquely Soviet about the whole affair. A disaster this vast, this complex, and this misunderstood becomes an exercise in forced optimism. You're told not to worry. You're told to keep working. You're told the readings are within acceptable limits, a phrase so vague it could apply to anything from soup temperature to reactor exposure. And you believe it because the alternative is worse. The alternative is accepting that you're being poisoned slowly by something that looks like nothing at all. Some men wear their dosimeters like talismans. They tap them nervously. They shake them as if that might make the numbers change. Others ignore theirs completely, stuffing them in pockets or leaving them in the barracks so they don't have to confront what they already suspect. It's easier to be afraid of something you can name, but radiation is a fog. It has no face. It doesn't growl in the bushes or crawl through vents. It simply is, all around you, all the time. Eventually, you learn to stop thinking about it. You accept the taste of copper in your mouth. You ignore the rash that won't fade. You chalk the fatigue up to bad sleep, the dizziness to dehydration. You get used to feeling worse in the morning than you did the night before. You stop asking how many sieverts it takes to kill a man and start asking how many a man can take before anyone notices he's dying. You stop fearing the exposure and start fearing the silence that follows it. Because here, no one tells you when you've had enough. They just stop calling your name at roll call. You're issued your equipment from the back of a faded truck that looks like it once carried potatoes and dignity and has long since run out of both. The quartermaster doesn't speak. He gestures. You hold out your hands and receive what appears to be a uniform, though uniform is a generous term. It's more of a sack with sleeves. The fabric is coarse and stiff, smelling of damp storage and industrial soap. The trousers have a drawstring waist that doesn't work, and the jacket's buttons seem to have been sewn on by someone with a grudge against consistency. There's no label, no size. If it fits, it's an accident. Your boots are made of rubber, the same kind used in dairy farms and flooded basements. They slosh when you walk, trapping sweat against your skin until your feet feel like boiled dumplings. The soles are thin, softening just enough to let you feel every rock, shard, and warped metal plate beneath you. There's a faint chemical odour baked into them, something between disinfectant and rubber cement. And after an hour of wearing them, you can't tell if it's coming from the boots or from your skin. Then there's the mask. It's a surgical mask in theory, a thin rectangle of gauze with ear loops that dig into your skin and a wire that's supposed to pinch over your nose, but doesn't. It hangs damp against your mouth after 10 minutes, trapping your breath and sweat and doing absolutely nothing to stop microscopic radioactive particles from sliding straight through. You see others using scarves, handkerchiefs, even t-shirts wrapped 3 times around their face. It's theatre, a ritual, something to convince yourself you're doing something useful. You could wear a screen door on your face and get the same level of protection, but at least the screen door might offer better airflow. Gloves are another highlight. You're lucky if they're rubber. Most are a brittle polymer that cracks along the fingers within a day. Some are clearly reused, stained at the fingertips, patched with tape, or marked with initials from a previous owner who may or may not still have hands. They're handed out by size, which is to say, indiscriminately. You watch one man wrap bandages around his wrists just to keep them from sliding off. They don't keep out moisture. They barely keep out the wind, but they're required, so you wear them, even when they turn your palms into blisters. For those deemed important enough, or unlucky enough, there's the lead apron. It's exactly what it sounds like, a heavy, awkward slab of lead-embedded cloth that hangs over your chest like a radiation-themed bib. It protects against some gamma exposure, in theory, but only the front of your torso, and only if you're standing perfectly still, facing the threat. Which you won't be. Ever. It weighs too much, shifts constantly, and causes an immediate and relentless sweat that soaks your clothes and leaves salt stains across your collar. Some men ditch it the first chance they get. Others cling to it like superstition. One man ties his with wire to keep it from falling off. Another tapes his shut with old gauze and hope. The helmet is perhaps the most laughable item. It's standard issue military surplus, a leftover from when wars were fought with bullets instead of isotopes. It offers excellent protection from low ceilings, falling debris, and the occasional frustrated superior. It offers absolutely none from the invisible energy currently crawling across your skin and into your bloodstream. But it completes the look, makes you feel official. You clench your jaw and wear it anyway, because otherwise you look like exactly what you are, an under-equipped man in a nightmare he doesn't understand. You learn quickly that this gear wasn't made for comfort, or survival, or even sanity. It was made to meet a checklist. It exists so that someone somewhere can write adequate protection distributed on a report. You know this the first time you have to strip it off. The inside of your jacket is soaked. Your socks are wrung out like sponges. Your undershirt has formed a second skin of salt and grime. You stink, not just of sweat, but of metal and chemicals and something else, something sour and unfamiliar, like mold crossed with electricity. Changing becomes a ritual, not of cleanliness, but of damage assessment. You peel off each layer slowly, inspecting the rash on your forearm, the welts along your hips where the waistband chafed. You rotate your boots to avoid new blisters, forming on top of old ones. You scratch at your neck until it bleeds, then wrap it with a strip of torn towel. You're not alone in this. Every man you see is red-eyed, raw-skinned, hunched slightly forward like his clothes are slowly eating him alive. You hear rumours of better gear, sealed suits, proper respirators, thick gloves that don't fall apart like pastry dough. But those are reserved for the reactor core teams, or so they say. Some believe the gear exists only in propaganda films. Others insist they've seen the real thing, worn by men who never take their helmets off and never speak to anyone else. Either way, you won't be getting any of it. Not here, not in your zone. After a few days, the gear stops feeling like something you put on. It starts feeling like part of you, a second, worse skin. You don't notice the stench anymore. You stop complaining about the itch. You grow used to the sense that your clothes are quietly failing at their one job. Protection becomes less of a concept and more of a hope, something you murmur to yourself as you step into another cloud of dust, another sealed building, another moment where you pretend your body isn't absorbing something that will never leave. At first, the plan was to use machines, robots, remote-controlled marvels of Soviet engineering, designed to withstand radiation and perform delicate cleanup tasks from a safe distance. That's what the officials said anyway. That's what they told the foreign press. The reality was that the machines worked about as well as everything else in the Soviet Union. Barely, briefly, and then not at all. Their circuits fried, their motors jammed. Their sensors, if they had any, reported nonsense before going blind. One robot wheeled itself in a tight circle until it toppled over like a drunk child. Another stopped moving entirely, halfway through its route, and began to smoulder. The lead engineer said it was a mechanical failure. The technician standing next to him said it was suicide. So they turned to the next best option. You. And men like you. Human beings, dubbed with bitter sarcasm as bio-robots. Because if the machines couldn't finish the job, clearly the answer was to send in something even more fragile. Flesh and bone, wrapped in damp cloth, barely protected, mostly expendable. You're handed a shovel, a pair of gloves that already have holes in the thumbs, and instructions that boil down to 3 words: remove the debris. The debris, in this case, is highly radioactive graphite from the exploded reactor core. It's scattered across the roof of Reactor 3, sitting there like chunks of normal rubble if you don't know what you're looking at. But you've been told now. You know this is the stuff that kills in minutes, not hours. Minutes. Some of it is still hot to the touch, literally and figuratively. A single piece can emit more radiation in 1 second than most people receive in a year. The only protection you have is time. You are told your shift will last 90 seconds, not a second more, not because someone values your safety, but because they've calculated how much exposure a human body can absorb before it becomes statistically inconvenient. You'll be wearing the usual: your canvas uniform, rubber boots, and a lead apron that covers only part of your chest and flaps uselessly when you move. You'll sprint out onto the roof, pick up as many chunks as you can, throw them into a waiting chute, and run back. That's the entire strategy. Human beings use like remote-controlled garbage claws. You wait at the edge of the roof with 10 other men, each of you silent, staring down at your own feet like you're at the edge of a diving board no one wants to step off. An officer holds a stopwatch and a whistle. When he blows it, the first man runs. You watch him disappear around a corner. You hear the scrape of metal against metal. Then you hear the whistle again. The man returns, gasping, face red, eyes too wide. He doesn't say anything. He just drops his shovel and walks away, staggering a little, like his joints are already giving out. When it's your turn, your mind goes blank. You run. The roof is uneven, littered with fragments of machinery, insulation, concrete, and graphite that glows faintly in the sun, like coal ready to catch fire. The metal beneath your boots is warped and groaning. Every step sends up a puff of dust that sticks to your face and clings to your clothes. You reach the nearest pile, scoop it up, and toss it toward the chute. The graphite is heavier than you expect. It doesn't feel like ordinary rock. It has a wrongness to it, a density that doesn't belong in the world. Your hands shake. Your breathing is shallow. The air up here tastes like battery acid and burnt plastic. Your skin begins to itch under your clothes. You don't know how long you've been out here, only that your heartbeat is loud enough to drown out everything else. Then the whistle blows again, and you turn and run. The metal grates beneath your feet. The railing blurs past you. The stairs appear too late, and you stumble down them, hitting the bottom on your hands and knees. The officer doesn't help you up. He writes something on a clipboard and points to the next man. Your entire shift was 82 seconds. You're not allowed to go back. That's the rule. 1 roof shift per man. Some argue this shows a shred of humanity. Others say it's just logistical efficiency. No point sending the same man back if his organs are already starting to falter. So you're reassigned? to digging trenches, decontaminating vehicles, moving bodies, tasks that seem easier on paper but carry their own flavours of invisible rot. You don't feel heroic. You feel like an extension of your own shovel. Later, you hear the term liquidator used in official reports, as if your job had something to do with water, but you weren't extinguishing anything. You were collecting it, scooping it, moving it from one cursed pile to another. The fire was long since out. What was left behind was just the cost of containing it. Reduction, relocation, delay. You realised that your body was never meant to survive the work. It was meant to absorb the danger, hold it for a little while, and then vanish before the numbers made anyone uncomfortable. You sleep poorly that night, not because of nightmares, but because your skin is hot, your joints ache. There's a raw patch on your neck where your collar rubbed, and it refuses to stop burning. You convince yourself it's just a rash, that you overexerted yourself, that the symptoms mean nothing. It's what everyone else does. You wake the next morning sore, nauseous, and ready for more orders. The machines couldn't handle the roof. You did. For 82 seconds. And someone wrote that down, somewhere, in a folder no one will ever read. The stairs up to the rooftop are narrow and rusted, each step groaning under your boots like it's considering collapsing. You hold the railing even though you've been told not to. It's metal, which means it's probably hot, radioactively, not thermally, but right now your legs are shaking too much to care. Ahead of you, the man in front has stopped at the top, frozen. The officer behind you barks something in Russian, sharp and impatient, and the man finally steps forward onto the roof. Then it's your turn. You step out into a different world. Not another place exactly, just a place that doesn't feel like it should still exist. The roof is a patchwork of broken panels, charred debris, and warped steel plates that don't look like they belong to any structure built by human hands. You expected wreckage, but not this. This is something worse, something diseased. The surface hisses faintly underfoot like it's breathing. There's a shimmer in the air, not quite smoke, not quite heat, more like reality is having trouble rendering the place correctly. You move forward as instructed. Your time has started. You can't see the man with the stopwatch anymore, but you know he's watching. You know he'll blow the whistle eventually, but not yet. Now it's your job to make the most of your 90 seconds. So you grab the shovel from your shoulder, set your jaw, and walk toward the nearest pile of graphite. You don't know why you thought it would be dull grey like the drawings in your school books. Instead, it's blackened and fractured, with sharp edges and veins of dark red running through it, like cooled lava or dried blood. It doesn't look like something that came from inside a reactor. It looks like something that clawed its way out. Your gloves don't help. The graphite cuts right through them. You scoop as much as you can in one motion and hurl it toward the chute. It lands with a clatter that echoes too loud for open air. You grab another piece. The second one is heavier. You can feel the weight pull at your arms, but also something else, like it's humming. You don't know if the vibration is real or if it's just your nerves starting to fray, but either way, you move faster. You have to. The heat is worse than you imagined. It's not just the sun, which is already burning down on your shoulders, but the roof itself. The metal radiates warmth in pulses, like an oven that doesn't know it's supposed to be off. The soles of your boots are softening. Every step sticks slightly, then pulls. The air tastes chemical and sharp, and every breath feels thinner than the one before. Your lungs are working overtime, but they're drawing in nothing useful. You cough once, then again, and now your head is ringing like someone's banging pots inside your skull. You keep going. You lift another chunk, throw it, wipe your sleeve across your forehead, realize the sweat has already soaked through the fabric. Your vision blurs. You try to blink it away, but your eyes sting, and your tears feel too thick. You can't stop. You're not allowed to stop. You don't know how much time has passed. The officer said you'd be pulled off at 90 seconds, but the whistle hasn't blown yet. So you keep going. You trip. Just for a second. Your foot catches on a twisted piece of rebar, and your knee slams into the metal. It's hot. Not just sun hot, core hot. You scream without sound, just a dry exhale through clenched teeth. You roll to the side and get back up. Fast, stupid, like your body's on autopilot. You leave a piece of yourself behind, probably a layer of skin from your leg, but there's no time to check. You grab another fragment. This one flakes in your hand, and the dust clings to your glove like ash. There's a crackle in your ears now. Maybe it's the Geiger counter. Maybe it's your hearing starting to fail. Your vision has narrowed, like you're looking through a tube. You feel your heart pounding so hard that your ribs hurt. Then finally, you hear the whistle. The first long blast, followed by 2 short ones. You drop the shovel without thinking and run. The way back is harder. Your limbs don't feel like yours. Your legs move, but sluggishly, like they're wrapped in wet wool. You stumble once more, catch yourself, and push forward. The metal staircase looms up at you like a threat. You take the steps badly, unbalanced, half leaping, half falling. You reach the bottom. Someone grabs your arm and steadies you. You want to thank them, but your tongue doesn't work. You're pulled to the side and handed a bottle of water. It tastes like iron and mould. You swallow it anyway. Your hands are shaking so hard you can't hold the bottle steady. Your face is pale. Your breath won't slow down. A medic appears, shines a light in your eyes, says something you don't register. You nod anyway. Someone pats your shoulder and tells you, "Good work." You don't respond. Your shift lasted 91 seconds, 1 second over. The officer scribbles something on his clipboard and says nothing. You're told to rest, to sit in the shade, to eat something. You do none of those things. You stare at your gloves, they're torn. The tips of your fingers are red and blistered. Your uniform is scorched at the knees. You feel like you've been microwaved from the inside out. Somewhere inside you, something essential has shifted. You don't know what it is yet, but you know it won't be coming back. You're not alone out here. There are thousands of others, some in uniform, some in overalls, some in lab coats stained with things they no longer try to wash out. They arrive in buses, on foot, by train, carrying duffel bags, toolboxes, folded documents, and the same expression you've come to recognize in every mirror: cautious determination, wrapped in quiet dread. No one says what they're really thinking, but you see it in their eyes. Everyone is calculating. How long will I be here? How much can I take? How much is this worth? The man in the bunk next to yours is 22, a conscript from Belarus who was told this counted as military service. He brought a deck of cards and a small book of poetry, neither of which he's touched since arriving. He spends most nights sitting upright, picking at the edge of his blanket and whispering numbers to himself. Maybe days, maybe sieverts. He says he'll get a certificate and a bonus when this is over. Enough to buy a car, maybe even an apartment. He says it like a prayer, a superstition passed down from men who didn't come home. Then there's the miner from Donetsk, older than the rest, broad-shouldered and always smoking. He says this isn't the worst job he's ever had, which is somehow both comforting and horrifying. He volunteered. At least that's the word he uses. He was told they needed men to dig a tunnel beneath the reactor to install a cooling slab. And when he asked if it was dangerous, the recruiter laughed and said, "Everything's dangerous." Now his hands shake when he drinks, and his teeth are turning black. But he keeps digging, one bucket at a time, muttering that the earth is cleaner than the air up here. You meet a medic who never takes off her gloves. She wears 2 pairs at a time, changes them 3 times a shift, and still keeps a bottle of iodine in her breast pocket like it's holy water. Her eyes are always red, though she claims it's just the dust. You see her sit with dying men and take notes while their skin peels away. She never flinches. She just writes and nods and presses her lips into a line so thin it looks like it might disappear altogether. She says she's documenting everything for a report. You don't ask who the report is for. Some of the men laugh, not often and not joyfully, but there's a sharp, bitter edge to the way they joke. They call themselves the Glowing Boys, okay, or the Half-Lives. They name their squads after chemicals and curse like they're trying to drive the poison back out through their lungs. You hear one man shout, "I bet I'll be sterile by next week." And the laughter that follows isn't laughter at all. It's a kind of collective exorcism. If you can name the fear, mock it, throw it back in the reactor's face, maybe it can't get to you. At least not right away. Others stay quiet. Entire units of young men move like ghosts, heads down, faces drawn. You see them shoveling debris, scrubbing trucks, building fences around fields that no one will ever walk through again. They don't talk about the work. They don't speculate about the long-term effects. They're just trying to get through the day. You ask one man why he came here, and he shrugs. "I didn't know what it was," he says, "and now I do." Not everyone was tricked. Some knew exactly what they were walking into. They came anyway. Maybe out of loyalty, maybe guilt, maybe because they believed it was better to die doing something that mattered than to live knowing they did nothing. You meet a former firefighter who came back even after being hospitalized in the early days. He still has burns on his arms and a tremor in his hands. When you ask him why, he says, "Someone has to." Then he takes another drag from a cigarette and walks into the smoke without hesitation. And then there are the ones who pretend it's not happening. Denial is a survival strategy, a popular one. You see men ignore symptoms, nosebleeds, nausea, sudden fatigue, as if admitting them makes them real. A man collapses during latrine duty and insists he just skipped breakfast. Another vomits behind the tents every morning and says it's the food. No one corrects them. You start doing the same. You stop counting headaches. You don't mention the rash on your leg or the sharp pain in your gut. It's better that way, more manageable, less real. You begin to understand that everyone here has made a kind of private bargain. For some, it's money. For others, pride. A few are clinging to vague promises of reward or recognition, but most are just trying to survive long enough to leave. There's no single reason anyone ends up here, only layers of pressure, illusion, desperation, and force. You're all moving through the same poisoned air, working in the shadow of the same silent horror, each man carrying a slightly different story about how it came to this. At night, the camp smells of sweat, smoke, and industrial soap. The tents creak when the wind rises. Someone coughs endlessly in the distance. You lie awake listening to it and wonder if he'll be there in the morning. You wonder if you will. There's no heroism here, not really. No speeches, no music. Just people doing what they were told, or what they had to, or what they couldn't avoid. And one by one, they're breaking, quietly, steadily, invisibly, not with a scream, but with a shuffle, a slump, a sigh. By the time you arrived, the fire was out. Not the danger, just the flames. What you stepped into was the aftermath, the slow motion collapse. But others came before you, in the hours when the smoke still curled black into the sky and the sirens hadn't stopped screaming. They were the first responders, the firemen from Pripyat, summoned in the dead of night, with no information, no warning, and no gear suitable for the kind of disaster that awaited them. Most of them didn't even know it was a nuclear facility. They were told there was a fire on the roof, a standard electrical blaze, something manageable. They arrived in ordinary trucks, the kind used for house fires and traffic accidents. They wore standard uniforms, canvas jackets, steel helmets, rubber gloves. Some didn't even bother with masks. What was the point? No one told them what had happened. They ran hoses up to the roof and sprayed water onto a radioactive inferno, oblivious to the invisible fallout swirling in the air around them. Some of them handled pieces of graphite with their bare hands, brushing the glowing chunks aside like ordinary rubble. One man later said it felt warm, like a hot stone from a fireplace. He didn't realize he'd already absorbed a lethal dose. The effects came fast. Within hours, their skin reddened and began to swell. Their eyes burned, their throats closed. They vomited in the trucks on the way back to the station. thinking it was smoke inhalation or nerves. It wasn't. Their bodies had started to break down from the inside, cells dividing without instruction, DNA unravelling like frayed rope. By morning, several were already unconscious. By the end of the day, they were in the hospital. Not the local clinic, Moscow, the best the Soviet Union could offer. But by then, even the best wasn't enough. The stories trickled down to your camp. Quiet at first, then louder. The man who touched the graphite, his hand turned black within hours. Another lost patches of skin with his uniform, as if the fabric had fused to him. One of them had his tongue swell until it cracked and bled every time he tried to speak. You weren't supposed to know any of this, of course. The official line was that the firemen were recovering well, but the men who came back from the city told different stories. Whispers of swelling faces, of teeth falling out, of skin sloughing off in wet sheets, like old wallpaper. They died slowly. Not all at once, and not with the clarity you might expect. Some lingered for weeks. Morphine helped at first, then it didn't. Their bodies stopped producing blood cells. Their organs liquefied one by one. Infections took hold that no antibiotics could stop. The nurses wore double gloves and face shields, but it didn't matter. The radiation was inside the patients now. It seeped out through breath, sweat, touch. Their hospital rooms became sealed chambers. When they died, they were wrapped in plastic and buried in coffins lined with zinc, sealed under concrete. Their uniforms were too radioactive to burn. Some were buried in lead-lined graves before their families were even informed. Back at camp, their names started to circulate like folklore. Not as cautionary tales, but as legends. They were called heroes, saints of the reactor. Their portraits appeared in state newspapers, airbrushed and expressionless, framed by patriotic slogans and red banners. You saw them on posters, young faces in dress uniforms, staring out with the blank pride of someone drafted into myth. You didn't know their real names, only the nicknames and stories, half true, half invented, all repeated with the hushed reverence reserved for martyrs and lost causes. You don't feel like one of them. You came later, after the worst of the chaos had passed. You had more information, even if it was filtered through layers of euphemism and denial. You had a dosimeter, for whatever that was worth. You were told not to touch certain materials, not to stand in one place for too long, to watch for signs of exposure. The firemen had none of that. They walked into hell thinking it was a job, like any other. You know, now it wasn't. And yet the difference feels paper thin. You might have more data, more stories, more rumours to guide you, but you're still guessing, still hoping you didn't stand too close, didn't inhale too deeply, didn't spend 1 minute too long and under the wrong wind. The firemen became symbols because they died visibly, quickly, horrifically. You're not sure what you'll become. A number in a registry, a case study, a rumour of someone who left Chernobyl and never quite recovered. Sometimes you wonder if they were the lucky ones. They didn't have to live with the uncertainty, the slow degradation, the quiet rot that starts in the marrow and works its way out. They didn't wake up 3 years later with a cough that won't go away, or a numbness that creeps up one side of the body and refuses to explain itself. They didn't bury their own teeth in the waste bin and pretend not to notice. They died knowing they had done their duty. You're still waiting to find out what yours will cost. Their sacrifice is praised over and over again by men who never met them and by officials who wrote the orders that sent them in blind. Every time you hear the word hero, it tastes bitter. Not because they weren't brave, but because bravery didn't matter. They were doomed the moment they stepped off the truck. All that followed was noise and pain. Their stories may be remembered, but the lesson is always softened. The footage is grainy. The names are mispronounced. The uniforms look clean in the documentaries. You know better. You saw what radiation does. You still see it, every day, in the eyes of the men around you, in the cracks of your own skin. The firemen weren't the beginning or the end. They were just the first to arrive. And you, whether you admit it or not, are following in their footsteps. At first, it's easy to ignore. You wake up groggy and chalk it up to bad sleep. You're not in your own bed. You're on a cot that sags in the middle and smells faintly of mildew and antiseptic. The tent walls flap in the wind. A man 2 bunks over snores like a tractor with a bad belt. Of course you feel tired. Everyone feels tired. You roll your shoulders, crack your neck, and convince yourself it'll pass. Then there's the taste. It arrives slowly, like an afterthought. You notice it one morning after a shift clearing debris. Something metallic, sharp, like a coin pressed against your tongue. You drink water, chew gum, try rinsing your mouth with iodine. Nothing helps. The taste isn't on your tongue, it's in your blood. You don't know that yet, but part of you suspects it. The sensation is wrong in a way you can't quite describe. It doesn't fade, it just lingers as if something deep inside you has started to rust. The nausea comes next. Subtle at first, a little queasy after meals. Then it's more frequent. You bend over to tie your boots and the room tilts slightly. You stand up too fast and your stomach flips. Your appetite disappears. The canteen food wasn't good to begin with. Lukewarm stews, stale bread, boiled cabbage that smells like old socks. But now, even the sight of it makes your throat tighten. You start skipping meals. You tell people it's nothing. They nod. They say the same. Fatigue settles into your body like wet cement. It's not just tiredness. It's heaviness. You move like every joint is carrying its own private hangover. Climbing stairs feels like a personal insult. You forget what it was like to wake up and not feel sore. You try to power through it. Drink more water. Take longer showers. Do stretches like some of the older men suggest. It doesn't help. The exhaustion is not in your muscles, it's in your marrow. Your gums start bleeding next. Not dramatically, just enough to stain your toothbrush pink and make apples taste like pennies. You bite into bread and feel a sharp sting as something loosens along the gum line. A few days later, a molar begins to ache for no reason. Then it stops. That worries you more. Pain means something's alive. Silence means something gave up. The rash on your neck spreads. It starts as a dry patch, irritated, red, easy to dismiss. You assume it's from your collar or maybe the rough towel you used that morning, but it doesn't go away. It crawls slowly down your chest and behind your ears. The skin becomes thin, shiny. You scratch at it absent-mindedly until it breaks, then curse when your fingertips come away damp with blood. You wrap a cloth around it and tell yourself it's just a reaction to the soap. You try to talk to a medic. She asks about your symptoms with practiced calm, makes a note on a clipboard, and hands you aspirin. You ask if this is normal. She says some men are just better than others. She tells you to rest more. You ask if you should be removed from duty. She doesn't answer. You realise she isn't authorised to. You thank her anyway. What else can you do? Around you, the same things are happening to other men. You see them rubbing their eyes raw, flinching at stomach cramps, struggling to keep down meals. No one talks about it. You learn to interpret the signs. Who's limping more than they were yesterday? Who's missing from roll call? Who's stopped speaking entirely? You notice that the men who sweat the most stop sweating altogether. The ones who cough don't stop. The ones who vomit do it quietly, behind tents with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggests it's become a daily routine. When you mention your symptoms to a superior, he raises an eyebrow and asks if you're looking for an excuse to leave. You say no, of course not. He nods. It's probably nerves, he says. The body plays tricks under stress. Then he claps you on the shoulder and tells you to toughen up. So you do. You stop reporting symptoms. You start measuring them in silence. You learn what you can work through, what you can hide, what you can laugh off in front of the others. Your sense of normal bends to accommodate the abnormal. You still taste metal, but you tell yourself it's the water pipes. You still wake up drenched in sweat, but you blame the summer heat. You still forget what day it is, but so does everyone else. Eventually, you stop waiting for the whistle to blow. You know your time is running out, whether someone's counting it or not. Your skin is paler, your muscles weaker. You move slower than you used to. Your hands shake when you try to thread your bootlaces, but you keep showing up. You keep working. Because what's the alternative? Sitting still, waiting to get worse? Pretending you're not already on a clock that no one can see? You start to understand that radiation doesn't kill you in a dramatic wave. It wears you down, molecule by molecule, like a tide slowly pulling the beach out from under your feet. One day, you'll take off your shirt and find a bruise that wasn't there the night before. You'll look in the mirror and see a stranger. You'll forget a name you've known for years. And by then, it'll be too late to change course. So you keep moving. You keep lifting. You keep digging. You stop wondering when the sickness will arrive. Because it already has. It just hasn't decided how loud it wants to be yet. You don't go to the hospital right away. Almost no one does. The men who do are the ones who can't stand, who wake up soaked in their own sweat and forget where they are, who pass out mid-task and wake up only long enough to vomit into a bucket. You tell yourself you're not there yet. You can still walk. You can still lift a shovel. You can still pretend that the ringing in your ears is just dehydration and not something unraveling deep in your nervous system. Besides, you've heard things about the hospitals, none of them reassuring. When you finally get sent in, it's not because you asked to go, it's because someone else notices. A medic sees your hands shaking too much to hold a canteen. A supervisor watches you fumble your gear 3 times in a row and decides you're no longer useful. They load you onto a transport truck with 4 other men, none of whom speak. You don't know where you're going. You don't ask. Everyone has stopped asking. The hospital is a converted school building on the outskirts of the zone, stripped of desks and filled with rows of metal cots, most of them occupied. The walls still have faded chalkboard outlines and alphabet posters curling from the corners. You think of classrooms, of childhood, and then immediately wish you hadn't. The air smells like bleach and spoiled meat. The fluorescent lights flicker so often, you're not sure whether your vision is failing or the wiring is. You're told to sit down and wait. So you do. The waiting area is already full. Some men are doubled over, others sit very still, staring ahead at nothing in particular. One is humming to himself, a low, tuneless sound that's more unsettling than soothing. A nurse walks past with a tray of syringes. Another pushes a cart loaded with gauze, scissors, bandages already soaked with something brown. There are no charts, no names being called, no clear sense of order. Just a room slowly filling with men who don't know whether they're getting better or worse. Eventually, a doctor appears. He's in his 30s, maybe younger. It's hard to tell. His coat is stained and unbuttoned, and he carries a clipboard like it might decide to leave on its own if he lets go. He glances at you, checks a form, and nods toward an empty cot. You sit. He asks questions. Are you vomiting? Can you stand unaided? Do you have lesions? You nod to some, shake your head to others. He writes things down. You don't recognize the words, but you do recognize the speed. He's moving quickly because there are too many of you and not enough of him. They take blood. They weigh you. They measure your pulse and your temperature and your blood pressure. But the numbers don't seem to matter. No one comments on them. No one explains what's happening. You ask if you'll be kept overnight. The doctor says, maybe, which means yes, but not because it will help. There's just nowhere else to put you. In the room next to yours, someone is screaming, not constantly, just in intervals, as if the pain arrives in waves. You try not to listen. You try not to think about what's happening behind the sheeted doorway. Across from you, a man begins coughing up something black. A nurse rushes over with a towel. She doesn't look surprised. She just folds the towel when he's done and takes it away without speaking. You see a man from your own unit, Yuri you think his name was, lying on a cot 2 beds down. His skin is yellow and shiny, stretched too tight across his face. He doesn't blink. You think he might be dead, but then his lips twitch slightly. You don't speak to him. He wouldn't recognize you anyway. The machines don't work. The X-ray is broken. The dosimeter is shared between 3 rooms, and only works if someone smacks it on the side first. There are too few IV poles, so some bags hang from coat hooks or are taped directly to the bed frames. The power flickers. Once, the lights go out entirely, and you lie there in the dark for 10 full minutes, listening to the distant hum of generators and wondering if the nurses will come back. No one tells you what you have. You aren't given a diagnosis, only a bed. The doctor says radiation sickness once in a low voice, and then moves on. The term means nothing to you now. It's too vague. It could mean vomiting for a week. It could mean dying in your sleep. Either way, it doesn't change what happens next. After 3 days, you're told you're stable enough to return to duty. You aren't, but they need the bed. You still can't keep food down. You've lost weight. You have a cough now, deep and wet, that makes your ribs ache every time it hits. But you stand and you dress, and you nod when they hand you your papers. The nurse says you've recovered. You don't laugh, but it's a close thing. Back at camp, no one asks what it was like. They can already see it on your face. You walk slower, you speak less, you flinch when someone touches your arm. The others pretend not to notice. They don't want to know. You didn't go to a hospital. You went to a holding pen for men who couldn't be ignored any longer. Now you're back, and you're useful again. That's all anyone needs to hear. You stop thinking of the hospital as a place of healing. It's not. It's a filtration system. It identifies who can still function and who's already too far gone. It separates the broken from the completely broken. It doesn't fix you. It just decides whether to send you home, send you back, or start writing your name on a list no one will ever admit exists. Somewhere, there's a file with your name on it. It contains your assignment, your vitals, your radiation exposure, and a handful of observations written by someone who never made eye contact with you. You've never seen the file, of course, you're not supposed to, but you're told it exists, and like everything here, you're expected to trust that it's accurate, complete, and stored with the seriousness your service deserves. You learn quickly that none of that is true. At first, the numbers don't make sense. Your dosimeter read high, dangerously high, before it stopped functioning altogether. The medic who checked you off after your rooftop shift made a note. You're sure of it. You remember the way she frowned when reading your form, the way she muttered under her breath. But later, when you're handed a copy of your exposure record for reassignment, the dose is lower. Significantly lower. So low it makes you wonder if you hallucinated the entire rooftop experience. You didn't. The lie just fit better on paper. You're not alone in this. Men who collapse during shifts return to duty the next week with documents that describe their symptoms as mild fatigue. One man who vomited blood for 2 days is told he likely had a stomach virus. Another who passed out while carrying a contaminated hose is listed as having suffered from heat exhaustion. You begin to understand that the records don't reflect reality. They reflect what someone has decided reality needs to look like. Cleaner, quieter, less damning. Doctors are under pressure. You see it in their faces, in the way they pause before writing anything down, in the sideways glances they give each other when someone asks about official diagnoses. You hear rumours that charts have been confiscated, rewritten, corrected. One nurse tells you she was instructed not to use the term radiation poisoning on any forms submitted to higher command. Instead, she writes stress-related complications or chemical exposure. Everyone knows it's a lie, but the lie has momentum. It's already halfway to Moscow before the truth gets out of bed. And then there are the men who disappear, not into the zone, out of it. You hear about them in passing. Someone in your unit misses morning roll call. Someone else says he was sent to a hospital in Kiev, or maybe Minsk. A few weeks later, no one's heard anything more. His belongings are quietly removed. His name isn't mentioned again. Later, you hear someone refer to him as transferred No one believes it, but no one questions it either. To question it would mean drawing attention, and drawing attention is dangerous. You see the posters going up in the village square, smiling liquidators in crisp uniforms, medals pinned neatly to their chests, hands shaking with party officials beneath bright red banners. The men in the photos look proud, clean, healthy. You know those faces. One of them didn't have eyebrows anymore the last time you saw him. Another couldn't walk. The photo must have been old, or staged, or taken before his legs began to buckle under him. Either way, the version of him on the poster is a fiction, immortalised in propaganda, too perfect to ever have been real. The official newspapers run stories about how the situation is under control. They print charts with the recovery timelines and articles praising the strength of Soviet industry. They mention radiation, only in vague terms, carefully framed within paragraphs about heroism and duty. You read an article one day that claims exposure levels are comparable to a long-distance flight. You laugh quietly and tear the page in half. No one stops you. They've stopped reading too. Sometimes you wonder what version of your story will end up in the archives. If someone opens your file years from now, what will they see? A name, a unit number, a radiation dose that's been altered twice, a medical chart that uses the phrase generally stable 3 separate times, a discharge form that lists you as fit for duty, even though your vision is blurred and your skin peels when you sleep. The truth of your experience, what you saw, what you felt, what you lost, won't be in there. Just numbers and euphemisms stacked neatly in a folder no one will ever check. You stop hoping for recognition. You stop expecting an apology. The truth is not a priority here. It never was. The system is built to erase discomfort, to sand down sharp edges until the story fits the narrative. And you, in your sweat-soaked uniform and cracked gloves, are one of those edges. You are not a hero. You are not a victim. You are data, muted, shaped, archived. The worst part isn't the lie, it's the way the lie becomes routine. You begin to repeat the official version of events because it's easier than explaining what really happened. You stop correcting people when they say the firemen were lucky to have had masks. You nod when someone calls the cleanup a great success. You write your letters home using careful words and hollow reassurances. You don't say what's really happening to your body. You don't describe the hospital. You don't mention the taste of blood in the mornings. You learn to survive inside the fiction because the alternative is being discarded entirely. In a place where records are rewritten and pain is relabeled, the only story that matters is the one the state is willing to tell. And if your truth doesn't fit, it won't be corrected. It'll be replaced. When your time as a liquidator ends, no celebration, no real goodbye, they hand you a certificate. It's printed on cheap paper with a decorative red border and a seal that smears if you touch it too soon. It thanks you for your dedicated service in the elimination of the consequences of the Chernobyl accident. It uses words like bravery and honour. It does not mention vomiting blood in a trench or sleeping on a cot that smelled like chemical burns. It does not mention the ache in your spine that never went away, or the tooth that turned grey and fell out without warning. Still, you're expected to smile when they hand it to you. You're told you'll be receiving a medal soon. Not a big one, nothing that comes with a pension or gets you saluted in public, but a commemorative badge shaped like a drop of blood, or a reactor, or a wreath. Something to pin on your chest at appropriate events, should you survive long enough to be invited. You're added to a registry of liquidators, a term that sounds more like a science fiction assassin than a man who spent 3 months scraping radioactive rubble into buckets. A reporter asks if you'll give a quote. You decline. She writes something flattering about you anyway. Back home, the welcome is quiet. There are no parades, no banners. You're not famous, not really. You're not one of the firemen who died on day one, whose funerals were broadcast on television, and whose faces were painted into murals on government buildings. You're just one of the thousands, an invisible labourer in a disaster that no one wants to talk about anymore. Your neighbours shake your hand stiffly, the way someone might greet a man who's been abroad for too long and returned with a strange lingering smell. At the factory where you used to work, your job is no longer available. They smile and say they'd love to take you back, but staffing has changed. You're told to check with the local office, maybe reapply for something clerical, something easier on the body. You nod, but your body's already past that point. You tire quickly. Your joints hurt when the weather shifts. Your skin is thinner than it used to be, and your nails crack without reason. You keep these complaints to yourself. They don't fit the heroic image. Your friends don't quite know what to say. Some ask what it was like. Others avoid the subject entirely. A few start coming around less often. You try not to take it personally. You cough during a conversation once and notice someone glance at your cup, like they're wondering whether to wash it twice or throw it away. You don't blame them. You don't even correct them. You start coughing less around others, not because you feel better, but because you've learned it makes people uncomfortable. You're called to a small ceremony at the regional centre. There's a man in a suit from the local party office. He reads a prepared statement. It's full of the usual language: sacrifice, Soviet spirit, triumph over adversity. You recognise phrases from the posters you used to see in the canteen. A few of the men you served with are there too, sitting stiffly in the front row. One is wearing sunglasses indoors. Another has lost so much weight you barely recognise him. After the speech, they hand out medals in small boxes and take a photo. You're not sure whether the photo will be used, or if it will be used at all. Afterward, there's juice and cookies. The juice is warm, the cookies are stale. You sit in a folding chair next to a man who keeps scratching at a patch on his neck. You don't speak, there's nothing to say. A woman from the mayor's office asks if you'd be willing to appear at a school assembly next month. You say you'll think about it, though you already know you won't go. You're tired of telling the story no one actually wants to hear. The government thanks you once, that's all. There's no follow-up, no check-ins, no medical team knocking on your door 6 months later to ask how your kidneys are holding up. You were a tool used in a crisis. The crisis passed and now you've been shelved. Quietly, respectfully, completely. The cough gets worse. It comes in fits, usually at night, echoing through the apartment like a distant engine trying to start. You wake up with blood on the pillow more than once. Your partner says it's probably your gums. You nod. You both know it isn't. The clinic tells you the same thing. Probably nothing. They prescribe antibiotics and ask you to come back if it gets worse. You don't. There's no point. You already know what's happening. You knew the moment your skin first burned under your collar. You knew when your dosimeter stopped working and no one replaced it. You still have the medal. It sits in a drawer next to your discharge papers and a photograph of your unit, all of you younger and cleaner than you ever really were. Sometimes you take it out and hold it in your palm, just to feel the weight. It's lighter than it looks, hollow, like a coin made to fool the eye. You think about melting it down, turning it into something else, something useful. But you never do, because some part of you still wants to believe it meant something, even if no one else remembers why it was given. Home is quieter than you remember, not in the peaceful way, in the awkward, too careful way, like everyone's trying not to look directly at you. The furniture is where you left it. The hallway rug still curls at the corner. The same window sticks when you open it, but something's shifted. Your apartment is smaller now, or maybe you're just bigger in all the wrong ways, heavier with silence, warped at the edges, slightly radioactive in a way no Geiger counter could fully measure. Your family means well. They ask if you're hungry, if you're tired, if you need anything. Then they flinch when you cough. They look away when you roll up your sleeve to show the rash that hasn't healed. At first, they treat you like a guest, then like a patient, then quietly, like a problem they don't know how to solve. They tell you to rest. They tell you to go outside. They tell you to stop worrying so much. Their voices are always gentle, but there's something behind the words, hesitation maybe, or fear. You try to slide back into routine. You visit old co-workers who don't say it, but clearly don't want you staying long. You walk through familiar streets and wonder if people notice your limp. Your joints are stiff now, unpredictable. Your skin dries and cracks around your knuckles, even in summer. You see a friend from school across the road, and almost wave. Until you remember, you look nothing like the version of yourself they last saw. You let them pass, they don't recognise you anyway. The doctors say you're within range. The test results are mostly normal if you don't look too closely. Your red blood cell count is low, your weight has dropped, your sleep is broken, and your stomach can't handle what it used to, but you're still technically functioning. And that's all the bureaucracy requires. You get a stipend, it arrives late, it's small. You're told there may be more compensation once the paperwork clears, though no one can say when that will be. You don't hold your breath, you know better now. The real weight doesn't come from pain, it comes from doubt. You look fine, that's what people say, and what they mean is, you don't look sick enough for us to take this seriously. You're walking, you're talking, you're not missing any limbs or coughing up blood in public, so you must be exaggerating. You must be anxious. You must be reading too many articles. The phrase "you're lucky to be alive" is supposed to be comforting, but all it does is make you feel ungrateful for being broken in ways no one wants to see. You start to withdraw, not on purpose at first. You just grow tired of explaining why you're tired. Tired of saying no to dinner invitations. Tired of brushing off the worried glances or the "you look pale today" comments that trail off without follow-up. You stop offering updates. You stop trying to explain that, no, this isn't something you'll recover from. It's something you adapt to, like a limp, or a stutter, or a name you didn't ask for but have to answer to anyway. There are days you wake up and don't recognise yourself. Not because you've changed that much, but because the person you were before Chernobyl feels fictional. He had plans, he had energy, he had skin that didn't flake off when he dried his hands. That version of you is gone. In his place is someone functional, polite, quiet. You make tea, you sweep the floor, you fold laundry, you cough into the sink and run the water until the red fades. You don't talk about it. The worst part is the distance. Not from strangers, you expected that. It's from the people who love you, or try to. They don't know what to do with this version of you. You're different now, and that makes them uncomfortable. They keep asking when you'll feel better. You tell them soon, and you both pretend to believe it. The gap between you grows quietly, like mould beneath wallpaper. You can still smile at each other. You can still share a meal, but something in the room is always rotting. You get good at pretending. You laugh when you're supposed to. You nod at the right moments. You keep your sleeves down and your voice level. You tell the story the way they want to hear it, emphasizing the medal, the teamwork, the sacrifice. You don't mention the blood. You don't describe the peeling skin or the men who didn't come home. You don't say that sometimes you still feel like you're back on the rooftop, breathing in ash that never fully left your lungs. Eventually, even you start to forget what parts of your body hurt before, and which ones are new. Pain becomes background noise. You stop tracking symptoms. You stop logging meals. You learn to live inside the erosion. Your identity thins, like the hair on your arms, like the colour in your face. You're still here technically, but less of you shows up every day. There's no ceremony for this part, no ribbon cutting, no speech. No one thanks you for enduring the aftermath. You just wake up, open the curtains, and try to keep breathing through whatever's left. You did your job. You came home. That was supposed to be the happy ending. It isn't. You were lucky, supposedly. You came back. You can walk. You can talk. You can still remember your name on most days. When you sit in the clinic waiting room and look at the faces around you, that's what they say. You're one of the fortunate ones. But the more time passes, the more the line between lucky and doomed begins to blur. Because surviving isn't the same as escaping. And for every one of you who made it out, there are a dozen who didn't. Some died quietly in hospital beds. Others never even got that far. There are towns that don't exist anymore. Evacuated, bulldozed, renamed. Villages swallowed by the exclusion zone, turned into ghost maps and cautionary tales. Pripyat, once full of children, swings, market stalls, now sits behind fences and signs marked with the trefoil symbol. Its buildings overgrown, its windows shattered, its silence complete. You meet people who used to live there. They carry photographs in their wallets, like proof that life once happened in that place. Families were told they'd be gone for 3 days. Most never went back. Some of their homes are still full of plates on tables, toys on shelves, calendars frozen in April. The fallout didn't stay behind the fence. Wind doesn't care about borders, neither does rain. It spread north and east and west, across rivers, forests, farmlands. Belarus got the worst of it, though they were hardly mentioned in the briefings. Milk was contaminated. Crops were pulled from the soil, still warm with radiation. Children were born with missing limbs, with eyes clouded white, with spines that curled the wrong way. Some breathed for a few hours. Some lived longer, only to grow up inside medical folders, thick with words like mutation and developmental delay. Their parents were told it wasn't connected, just bad genetics. Coincidence. You've seen the cemeteries, not the neat public ones with headstones and flowers, but the restricted plots where the first responders are buried in lead-lined coffins, sealed under concrete. No names on the markers, just numbers, no visitors allowed. Their clothing was too radioactive to burn, their remains too dangerous to handle without protective suits. You hear stories about nurses who attended the funerals wearing hazmat gear. You hear about family members denied entry. Some didn't even get a body back, just a form to sign and a pension that barely covered rent. You see the long-term costs in the faces of the next generation. Children with brittle bones, teenagers with hearts too weak for stairs, entire classrooms filled with kids who need regular blood tests just to make it through the month. Some of their parents were liquidators, some weren't. But the dust got into everything, into clothes, into cellars, into the hair of the dogs that roamed the abandoned villages. No one knows exactly how far it reached, or what the numbers mean anymore. You stopped believing the numbers years ago. You meet women who are told not to have children, then told they were safe, then blamed when their babies didn't survive. Doctors shrug. Officials deny. Records go missing. You learn that radiation doesn't just break bodies, it corrodes the truth. And once the truth breaks, it doesn't grow back the same. You're not special. You're just part of a generation that was quietly erased. Not all at once, not violently, just faded out. Your cohort ages faster than it should. Your reunions grow smaller each year. You know fewer and fewer men who still work full shifts, who don't carry medication in their coat pockets, who can stand for more than 10 minutes without pain. You stop calling it bad luck. You stop calling it anything at all. It's just the shape of your life now. Warped at the corners, soft in the middle. Some men keep fighting. They file appeals. They demand recognition. They gather in crumbling buildings for meetings, hold up documents that prove exposure, demand benefits that were promised and retracted. You admire them in a quiet way. But you stopped expecting justice a long time ago. You don't want another medal. You don't need another certificate. What you want can't be returned. Health, time, a life uninterrupted. No office can give you that. The story of Chernobyl is still told. Documentaries, books, films. There's a version for every audience. Heroic, tragic, technical, apocalyptic. You watch some of them, just to see how far from the truth they'll wander. Some get close, others feel like fairy tales with neatly drawn villains and carefully resolved endings. None of them mention you. Not directly, not by name. You're one of the thousands in the background, silent, coughing, ghost-like. Useful for a statistic, not for a headline. And yet you're still here. You wake up, you make tea, You try not to think about how many organs are underperforming. You try not to count how many funerals you've attended for men your age who used to lift iron beams like toys. You try not to imagine what your bones look like now, or how long until your liver stops pretending it's coping. You don't need a doctor to tell you the numbers. You know. You've known since the day you smelled ozone in the wind and watched the graphite on the roof shimmer in the sunlight. Some people call you a survivor. Others don't call you anything at all. The state forgot you. History misplaced you. But your body remembers. The damage is printed in your cells, carved into your marrow like a signature. The legacy of Chernobyl isn't just a failed reactor or an empty city. It's you, and the slow, quiet way your body proves, year after year, that the accident never really ended. You did what you were asked to do, not because you wanted to, not because you understood the full scope of what was happening, but because that's what was expected. Orders came down. You picked up the shovel. You put on the uniform. You climbed the stairs, stepped onto the roof, and stood where machines failed and men before you fell. No one offered you a choice that felt real. You moved forward because backward didn't exist. There was no glory in it, not in the moment. There were no speeches playing from loudspeakers or stirring anthems rising in the background. Just your breath in your mask, your boots sticking to a hot metal surface, the weight of something unseen burrowing slowly into your blood. The heroism came later, printed in newspapers and whispered by officials. But you didn't feel like a hero. You felt like a placeholder, like a part that could be swapped out once it wore down too much to function. Maybe you made it home, maybe you didn't. Maybe your name ended up on a plaque in a government hallway, or maybe it faded from a list typed on a dusty typewriter and filed away forever. It doesn't really matter anymore. You existed in that moment, and that was enough. You stood in the center of a disaster that tried to erase everything it touched, and even if you couldn't stop it, you didn't run. That counts for something, or at least it should. The world moved on. It always does. New disasters arrived. New headlines took over. The zone stayed where it was, fenced off and monitored by instruments that beat more often than they should. Scientists walk its borders now. Tourists visit and pose for photos near moss-covered amusement rides. Some treat it like a relic. Others treat it like a curiosity. Few treat it like a graveyard. Fewer still remember that men like you were once there with shovels and brooms, cleaning up what could never truly be cleaned. You left a part of yourself there, maybe in the dust that settled into your boots, maybe in the bunker where you tried to sleep but couldn't stop shaking, maybe in the cough that never left. It wasn't always visible, the damage. That's how radiation works. It's patient. It lingers long after the applause has faded and the banners have been taken down. It waits until you're quiet, until the world stops looking, and then it finishes what it started. But you mattered. Not in the way statues are made for, not in the way that earns parades. You mattered in the quiet way, the way someone matters when they do what others won't, when they step into the unthinkable, not because they were brave, but because there was no one else left to do it. You helped hold the line between disaster and denial. You helped buy time for the rest of the world to understand what had gone wrong. It's possible no one thanked you properly. That wouldn't be surprising. The thanks came late, and uneven, and mostly in the form of paperwork. They didn't see what you saw. They didn't breathe what you breathed. They didn't feel their insides turn soft under the weight of invisible forces. But some of us remember, and some of us are still telling your story, even if it takes 40 years and a midnight video to do it. So you can rest now. You've carried enough. The world didn't stop because of what you did, but maybe it paused long enough to think. Maybe, in some quiet office or some quiet mind, your work caused a little bit of hesitation before the next mistake. Maybe that's the best any of us get. A little more time for someone else. A delay in the next disaster. A warning whispered just loud enough to be heard. You were loyal. You were used, you were human, and they sent you into something inhuman and expected you to cope. And somehow you did. You endured without fanfare. You broke slowly and silently and far away from the cameras. You were built for none of it, and you did it anyway. That's what people never understand about men like you. It's not the strength, it's the silence. So close your eyes now. Let the metal taste fade. Let the heat lift from your chest. Let the dust settle for good this time. If your body aches, let it. If your memories come in flashes and fragments, that's all right. You were there. You remember enough. You can let go of the rest. The zone is quiet now. The birds came back, though they don't sound quite right. The trees are taller but twisted. The silence remains, though it no longer feels sterile. It feels sacred, like something too large to explain left its mark and then moved on. And under that silence, in the soil and the stone, there's still a trace of you. A footprint no storm has washed away. And that brings us to the end of tonight's quiet descent into a disaster that didn't want heroes, just obedient men with shovels, paper masks, and nowhere else to go. If you're still awake, thanks for drifting through history with me. If you'd like early access to more soft-spoken collapses of bodies, empires, or basic human oversight, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about when you'd have started coughing. On the roof, in the trench, or back home with no one listening. Sleep well. You've earned it.